A man killed his 7 months pregnant girlfriend. Then he walked into the police station to report her missing. And that same night, he was texting her on WhatsApp, as if she could text back. A 22-year-old girl handwrote a list. 15 reasons why I should leave Filippo. A week later, Filippo killed her. This is the dark side of Italy's internet. May 2023, Sanago, Italy, a small town on the outskirts of Milan. Giulia Tramontano is 29 years old, 7 months pregnant, and that afternoon she found out something that changed everything. 48 hours later, she was dead, and her boyfriend was texting her on WhatsApp like nothing had happened. Italy had, in 2023, one of the darkest years in its recent history in terms of gender-based violence. That year, 120 women were killed in Italy, more than half of them by their own partners or ex-partners. That is one woman every 3 days. Today we're going to talk about one of those cases, a case that brought all of Italy to a standstill. That filled the front pages of every newspaper. That had people silently reading through a couple's WhatsApp messages, published by the press, trying to understand how someone could do what Alessandro Impagnatiello did. This is the story of Giulia Tramontano. Giulia was born in Naples in 1994, but she'd been living in Sanago, in northern Italy, for years. That's where she'd built her life. She worked as a real estate agent. She was close to her family, especially her sister Chiara, who she talked to all the time. She was one of those people who, according to everyone who knew her, lit up every room she walked into. In 2020, she met Alessandro Impagnatiello. He was 27, a bartender at the Bamboo Bar inside the Armani Hotel in Milan, one of the most exclusive spots in the city. Handsome, charming, easy to like. Things moved fast, they moved in together, and in 2023, Giulia got pregnant. They were going to have a son. They were going to name him Tiago. What Giulia didn't know, what nobody had told her, was that Alessandro had been living a double life for months. He had a lover, a co-worker, also employed at the Armani Hotel, and this woman knew Alessandro had a girlfriend. What she didn't know was that the girlfriend was pregnant. When the co-worker found out after seeing photos on Instagram of Alessandro standing next to a woman with a baby bump, she confronted him. He denied everything, told her that baby wasn't his, and to convince her, he got her a DNA test. The test was fake. Impagnatiello had forged a DNA document to make his lover believe that the baby Giulia was carrying wasn't his. All to keep both relationships going, without either woman knowing the full truth. But his lover didn't entirely buy it. She kept digging, and eventually she reached out to Giulia directly. On May 27th, 2023, Giulia and Alessandro's lover met in person, at the Armani Bamboo Bar itself, the very place where he worked. Think about that for a second. Both women in the same place where the man who had been deceiving them both served cocktails to his customers. Giulia came home that afternoon with the full picture. The entire house of lies had collapsed in a single conversation. The man she lived with, the man she was going to have a child with, had lied to her about everything. He had another relationship. He had forged a DNA test. He had told his lover the baby wasn't his. That night, Alessandro came home, and according to his own later confession, he killed her. He stabbed her 37 times. 37. Giulia was 7 months pregnant. What happened next is where this case becomes something different, something that goes beyond the crime itself, and says something deeply disturbing about the mind of Alessandro Impagnatiello. After killing her, he tried to burn the body, first inside the apartment, in the bathtub. Using denatured alcohol, it didn't work, so he moved it outside and tried again with gasoline, behind a parking lot a few blocks from their home. That didn't work either. He ended up hiding the body in that same spot, behind the garages, in a patch of dirty grass, just meters from where they lived. And then he went back to his routine. The next day, he went to work. On May 28th, one day after the murder, it was Alessandro himself who walked into the police station to report Giulia missing. Him, the killer, went to the police to say his girlfriend had disappeared. And while he was talking to the officers, he gave them a fake address where she could supposedly be found. An address that didn't exist. But the most disturbing part came after. Impagnatiello started texting Giulia's phone, the number of a woman who was already dead. Messages he wrote as if she could read them, as if at some point she was going to write back. "Babe, where are you? We're all so worried about you. Baby, please, just give us a sign. I've got reporters harassing me outside the house. Please, this is unbearable. My mom is crying. My brother too. Please, just say something." Those messages were recovered by police and entered into evidence at trial. Italy read them in silence, one by one, trying to process what they were looking at. A man texting his dead girlfriend, who he had killed himself, who he had tried to burn, who he had hidden in a patch of dirt behind a parking lot, texting her like she was going to write back. Giulia's family knew from the very first moment that something was deeply wrong. Her sister Chiara went on television that same night of May 28th. She appeared on Chi l'ha visto, the Italian equivalent of a missing persons show. She said on camera that her sister would never have left on her own, that something had happened. She was right. Meanwhile, the police investigation was moving forward. They found biological traces of Giulia in Alessandro's car. The story was starting to fall apart, and on May 31st in the early hours of the morning, Impagnatiello broke down. He confessed. Giulia's body was found hours later, exactly where he said it would be, just a few meters from their own apartment. Giulia Tramontano and her son, Tiago, who never got to be born. As the investigation unfolded, details came to light that made the case even darker. Analysis of Impagnatiello's phone revealed he had Googled how to dispose of a body, how to get rid of blood traces, what happens to a corpse at different temperatures. The searches had been made after the murder, which the judge interpreted as evidence that he hadn't planned the crime in advance, but panicked afterward. But there was something else. Something the prosecution presented as part of a plan that had been in motion for much longer. Impagnatiello had been poisoning Giulia with rat poison for months, mixed into her food and drinks. The goal, according to prosecutors, was to cause a miscarriage so he could keep his double life going without the pregnancy making everything more complicated. Giulia had no idea she was being poisoned, that the man she lived with, the father of her child, was putting rat poison in her food. The trial began in January 2024. Impagnatiello testified voluntarily from day one. He admitted to killing her, but he said it wasn't premeditated, that he was stressed, that he decided to do it without any real reason. The prosecution asked for life in prison. The defense pushed for a lesser sentence, arguing there was no premeditation. On November 25, 2024, the International Day for the Elimination of Violence Against Women, Alessandro Impagnatiello was sentenced to life in prison. The sentence was upheld on appeal in June 2025. When the verdict was read, he didn't react at all. He just sat there staring at the desk in front of him. Giulia's parents wept. There's something about this case that goes beyond the horror of the crime itself, and it's the way the internet and the digital world were woven into every single stage of the story. Impagnatiello's double life was sustained for months through lies he built both in person and online. The fake DNA test, the text conversations with his lover, the Instagram photos that gave him away. The whole house of cards was built and came crashing down, largely through screens. And after the murder, he used WhatsApp as a tool to construct an alibi, to project the image of a desperate boyfriend searching for his partner. The same app he'd been using to coordinate with his lover, he was now using to text a dead woman and pretend he had no idea what had happened. Page 12 of the newspaper, La Repubblica, published the WhatsApp messages between Giulia and Alessandro, organized by category. The fight over the lipstick, the breakup announcement, the baby's future, the messages sent after he killed her. Italy read every single one in silence, trying to make sense of it. Today, the case of Giulia Tramontano is part of a larger conversation happening in Italy about femicide, about gender-based violence, and about what it means that a woman dies every 3 days at the hands of her partner or ex-partner. Her sister Chiara became a public voice in the movement. She posted on social media a letter written from the perspective of Tiago, the baby who was never born, addressed to his father. "Dad, you're a monster. Now Mom and I are together forever and nobody can hurt us." Giulia Tramontano was 29 years old. She was going to be a mom. She had her whole life ahead of her, and the last time anyone heard from her was at 9:43 p.m. on May 27th, 2023, when she texted her mom telling her to get some rest. That was it. Our next case also takes place in Italy, also in 2023. Also ends with a woman murdered by the man who claimed to love her, but this case sparked something that the Giulia Tramontano case didn't. A nationwide movement, a letter that went viral around the world, and a handwritten list that Italy will never be able to forget. I'm talking about Giulia Cecchettin. Another Giulia, another partner, another murder, but this case had something different. Something that kept it from being just another headline about gender-based violence. This case produced a letter that went viral around the world, a handwritten list that Italy will never forget, and a movement that permanently changed the way the country talks about its men, its women, and the culture that produces both. This is the story of Giulia Cecchettin. Giulia was born in Padua on May 5th, 2001. She was the middle child of 3 siblings, Elena, the oldest, and Davide, the youngest. Her mom, Monica, died of cancer in October 2022 when Giulia was 21. She carried that grief with a kind of maturity that everyone who knew her recognized. She was studying biomedical engineering at the University of Padua. She was brilliant. She was about to graduate. There was exactly 1 week left until her graduation ceremony when she disappeared. She had her whole life mapped out. She had plans. She had real, concrete dreams. and she had an ex-boyfriend who couldn't accept that the relationship was over. Filippo Turetta was 22 years old. He was Giulia's classmate at the university, that's how they met, in 2020. They dated for 3 years, and when Giulia decided to end things in August 2023, something in Filippo broke. Or maybe it didn't break. Maybe it had always been there. Because what came to light after the murder was that the relationship had been showing red flags for a long time. Flags that in another context might have seemed normal. Flags that our culture often normalizes and calls intense love or natural jealousy. Flags that Giulia, at some point, had written down. After the murder, Giulia's family found a list, handwritten, in a notebook, dated months before her death. The title was 15 Reasons Why I Should Leave Filippo. Italy read the whole thing. The world read the whole thing. And what that list said wasn't the portrait of a movie monster. It was the portrait of something far more common, far more recognizable, far more disturbing precisely because of that. Some of the reasons Giulia wrote: he complains when I put fewer hearts than usual in my messages. He needs to know everything, even what you tell your friends about him, even what you tell your therapist. He has weird ideas about getting revenge for betrayal, about torture, things like that. He makes me feel guilty when I want to spend time with other people. He goes through my phone. When we fight, he says he'll kill himself if I leave him. 15 reasons, 15 red flags, 15 moments where Giulia, in her own handwriting, had documented that something was very wrong, that she needed to leave, that she knew it, and yet she stayed. Because that's also part of how this kind of relationship works. Because the red flags get normalized. Because the person behind them also has good moments. Because leaving isn't always as simple as it looks from the outside. After the breakup in August of 2023, Giulia and Filippo stayed in contact. He kept pushing. He told her he was depressed, that he couldn't see a future without her, that he wanted to kill himself. Giulia sent voice messages to her friends talking about him. Those messages went viral after her death. In one of them, in a calm voice, almost apologetic, she said Filippo was making her feel guilty, that his words sounded a lot like blackmail, but that she didn't want to be cruel to him. That's Giulia in those recordings, trying to be a good person to someone who was manipulating her, carrying the emotional weight of a man who was using his own pain as a tool for control. On November 11th, 2023, Giulia agreed to go out with Filippo one last time. He had promised he would respect her decision, that they could be friends, that he was going to be okay. They went out to eat together. Afterward, according to security footage, they went to a shopping mall, and it was there, in the parking lot, that everything changed. The security camera footage captured the exact moment. You can see Filippo grab Giulia, you can see them struggling, you can see Giulia fighting back, and you can see him force her into his car. That was the last thing the cameras recorded. Giulia's family started to worry that same night when she didn't respond to their messages. The next day, her dad Gino went to the police. The search began immediately. Italy followed the case in real time. Every update made the news. Every silence felt heavy. Filippo Turetta had fled the country. He crossed the border into Austria and kept driving toward Germany. For days, Italy searched for him while Giulia's family waited for news. On November 18th, 7 days after her disappearance, Giulia's body was found in a wooded area near a lake in Barxis in northeastern Italy. She was inside a large plastic bag, hidden in a cave 50 meters up, in an area that's closed off during the fall. The autopsy revealed between 25 and 30 stab wounds. Several of them were defensive. Giulia had tried to protect herself. One day later, on November 19th, Filippo Turetta was arrested in Germany. His car had run out of gas on the highway. When German officers pulled him over, his first words were, "I'm Filippo Turetta. I killed my girlfriend." What happened in Italy in the weeks that followed was something the country had never seen before. Vigils, demonstrations, silent marches, flowers in the town squares, Giulia's name written on walls, on signs, in posts by millions of people. Giulia was femicide victim number 105 in Italy in 2023. That number, 105, was repeated across every outlet as a reminder that this was not an exception. It was part of a pattern of one woman every 3 days. But what turned this case into something different, what pulled it out of the statistics and made it a cultural breaking point, was a letter. On November 20th, 2023, 9 days after her sister's murder, Giulia Cecchettin published a letter in Corriere della Sera, one of the most important newspapers in Italy. Elena is 1 year older than Giulia. She has a PhD, and she wrote something that Italy and the world wasn't ready to read. The letter said, among other things, Filippo is not a monster. A monster is an exception, someone outside of society, someone society doesn't have to take responsibility for. But here, the responsibility exists. Filippo is the healthy son of patriarchy and rape culture. Femicide is a crime of the state. It is the result of a culture that undervalues the lives of women. What hit especially hard? Elena named specific behaviors: friends who make comments about women's bodies, co-workers who talk over women in meetings, men who can't take no for an answer. And she said that all of those behaviors, tolerated and normalized by society, are part of the same system that produces femicide. The letter went viral globally within hours. It was translated into dozens of languages. Elena, who had lost her younger sister less than 2 weeks earlier, overnight became one of the most listened to feminist voices in Europe. Giulia's funeral was held on December 5th at the Abbey of Santa Giustina in Padua. Around 10,000 people attended. It was broadcast live on Italy's major television channels. Her dad, Giulia Cecchettin, gave the speech, and what he said also went viral. He didn't talk about revenge. He didn't talk about hate. He talked about change. He asked the men in the room to be agents of change in a society that he said undervalues the lives of women. "I don't want revenge," Gino said. "I want my daughter's death to mean something." Days later, the University of Padua awarded Giulia a posthumous honorary degree in biomedical engineering, the graduation she had been waiting for her whole life. The trial against Filippo Turetta began in September of 2024. He opted for an abbreviated process, a procedure in the Italian legal system where, in exchange for waiving a full oral trial, the sentence can be reduced. During the trial, Turetta submitted a written statement of 40 pages. He described everything: what he did that day, how it happened. He talked about his emotional state, his inability to accept the breakup, the thoughts he'd been having for weeks before the crime. And he revealed something that sent a chill through all of Italy. He had prepared materials in advance: knives, duct tape, a shovel, black garbage bags, a wet sock to muffle her screams. He had kept them in his car for several days before that November 11th. He took Giulia out to dinner, to the mall, and he had those things in his trunk the whole time. He said he hadn't definitively decided to kill her, that he had it in mind as a hypothesis, that night, when they argued again, something made him act. The prosecution didn't buy it. Prosecutors argued that was premeditation, that a man who spends days carrying knives, duct tape, a shovel, and garbage bags in his car isn't just thinking through hypotheticals. On December 3rd, 2024, exactly 1 year and 22 days after the murder, Filippo Turetta was sentenced to life in prison. When the judge read the verdict, Turetta was standing next to his lawyers. He showed no visible reaction. He stood still, staring straight ahead. Giulia Cecchettin was in the courtroom. His children Elena and Davide didn't go. He had said before that the trial didn't matter to him, that as far as he was concerned, everything ended on November 11th of the year before, that he wasn't looking for revenge. He just wanted his daughter's death to mean something. Outside the courthouse, people who had never met Giulia wept. But let's go back to the list, to those 15 reasons handwritten in a notebook, because that list isn't just a document. It's a mirror. When Italy read it, when the world read it, something uncomfortable happened. A lot of people recognized in those lines behaviors they had seen before, in friends' relationships, in past relationships of their own, in themselves. He complains when I put fewer hearts in my messages. How many people have been in a relationship where texting was a battlefield, where the number of emojis became proof of love or lack thereof? He needs to know everything, even what you tell your therapist. How many people have felt like they couldn't have a private conversation even with their own therapist? He says he'll kill himself if I leave him. That's not love, that's control, that's emotional blackmail. And yet, how many people have stayed in relationships because they were terrified of what would happen if they left? Giulia's list became an educational tool. It was shared in high schools, in universities. Organizations that work with victims of gender-based violence used it as a working resource. Because what it describes isn't a horror movie relationship. It's a relationship that a lot of people could recognize from their own lives. And that's exactly the point Elena made in her letter, that Filippo Turetta was not an anomaly. He was the product of a culture, and that culture feeds on small, everyday, normalized behaviors. Behaviors that are all on that list. What's the digital angle in this case? It's everywhere. Giulia's voiced messages to her friends describing Filippo's behavior, messages her friends had saved and that the family was able to recover after her death. Those recordings became both evidence and public testimony. Italy listened to them. That calm voice, almost apologetic, describing patterns of control that she herself kept downplaying, it became part of the national conversation. The list of 15 reasons, handwritten but photographed and shared digitally by millions of people, was the most read document in Italy in November 2023. Elena's letter was published in a newspaper, but it lived on the internet. It was shared on Instagram, on Twitter, on WhatsApp. It reached readers in Argentina, in Mexico, in Spain, in Brazil, in the United States. It was the kind of content the internet can distribute within hours to every corner of the world, and the parking lot security camera. That footage, Filippo grabbing Giulia, the struggle, the moment he forces her into the car, was the most damning evidence in the case. In another era, without networked digital cameras, it might never have existed at all. The internet was the stage where this case was collectively processed, where Italy grieved, where the world came to understand what had happened. Today, the Giulia Cecchettin Foundation, created by her father Gino and her sister Elena, is actively working on gender violence education. They give talks at schools, they work with institutions, they publish materials. The Italian government, under pressure following the case, launched an official awareness campaign on femicide. The Minister of Education said that patriarchy no longer exists in Italy. Elena Cecchettin responded on social media, "My sister was killed by an Italian man. White, respectable. What is the government doing to prevent it?" The question still doesn't have a sufficient answer. Giulia Cecchettin was 22 years old. She was 1 week away from graduating. Her last public photo before she disappeared is from that day, smiling, hair up, at the mall where Filippo forced her into his car. That image traveled around the world. Italy remembers her like that, smiling, 1 week away from receiving the degree she had worked so hard to earn. And it also remembers the list, those 15 reasons written in her handwriting, which are now part of the story of a country that is trying, still, imperfectly against resistance, to understand why a woman dies every 3 days at the hands of someone who claims to love her. This is Italy. 2 Giulias, 2 killers, 2 cases from the same year that shook an entire country and put front and center something that had always been there, normalized and silenced. The internet was the arena where that conversation exploded, where WhatsApp messages became public evidence, where a handwritten list traveled to every corner of the world, where a sister's letter became a manifesto. Convicting the guilty isn't enough. Elena Cecchettin said it better than anyone. Monsters don't exist. There are just men shaped by a culture, and that culture either changes or it doesn't, but not on its own. Which country should I cover next? I read all your comments. Thanks for the support, as always.